Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that's been on my mind for quite a while, and I'm having a really hard time trying to get all of this information out and discuss my thoughts on the topic. And the topic that I'm going to be looking at is going to be booster box prices. So booster box prices is a rather hot topic in the Digimon community, considering the booster box prices at the start of the game's release in English were on the rather high side, and that was mostly due to the scarcity of the product. And now that we're all the way in BT05, getting ready for BT06, the product is more readily available and there's a lot more of the product floating around. So with all of the information we have in terms of box EVs, singles prices, stocks and quantities, we have more information to actually go off of to determine what we should be paying for booster boxes. So I think based on all of the information we currently have, Double Diamond should not be $95 a booster box. Now you could argue, oh, but that's the MSRP, and then my rebuttal will be, but that's not the MSRP of a booster box, and then your rebuttal will be, yeah, but you just take the MSRP of a pack and then times it by the amount of packs in a box, and that's the MSRP of the booster box. And then I'm going to tell you, well, no, you're wrong, because that's not how a booster box's MSRP works. A booster box doesn't have MSRP. Stores buy booster boxes from distributors at particular prices, and the price that they're paying on average for a booster box is around that $55 to $65 range. Stores generally should be selling their booster boxes with a 15% profit margin in mind. So if we take that high end of $65 and then add that 15% to it, then we get about $75. So that's the price that you generally should be spending on average for a booster box of any given Digimon product. Now, taking a look at the current and newest Digimon set that we have available to us, which is going to be BT05 Battle of Omni, we could see stores are finally trying to sell the booster boxes for an appropriate price. Now, the only problem then becomes how much of this product is currently floating around in the secondary market, on top of the fact of what is this booster box's EV. So I think with the booster box's EV being so low, that even paying $75, you're at a very high-risk situation of not even opening $75 worth of cards to use as trade fodder or just to try to sell off. Now, granted, the casual player won't even care about this. They'll just pay the $75, open up some cards, have a good time, and good for them. But coming from a more marketing and single-selling and store perspective, this is generally not what you want to see. So what you generally want to see coming out of a box EV is something that is about on par with what you're going to be selling the booster boxes for, on top of a little bit of extra room, so it makes the player feel very happy about what they're opening at almost all times. Ideally, that's what you're going to be wanting to look for, and the fact that the booster box EV is as low as it is means that it's going to create these feel-bad situations where you spend $75 on a booster box and you only get, let's just say, $30 to $50 worth of cards to either sell or trade with. So it just doesn't necessarily create a very good feeling, making it so that you don't want to come back to the set, making it a kind of a toxic asset, and toxic assets as a store is something you want to avoid. So usually when players stop buying the product, then stores are kind of forced to try to offload the product in some way, shape, or form, so they have to decrease the price of the product. That's kind of what we're seeing here, where it's like the EV is just so low, people don't want to buy this type of a booster box for $100 because there's no way, shape, or form you're going to be getting $100 of value out of the set. So in order to make the set more appealing, in order to, open it, they have to decrease the price. So it just so happens that they decrease the price to where the price of the booster box should have been to begin with. And the sad thing is, not all stores are selling the booster boxes at this price, and that's kind of the issue that I'm going to try to address here, is that booster boxes should cost this price because there's no way, given how the current shape of the secondary market is, that you're ever going to be opening $100 of EV out of your booster box unless you hit the one good card that's going to be making the entire set worthwhile. So taking a look at the singles in BT05, we could see that the best selling card and the most expensive card in the set is going to be Omnimon Zwart Defeat Alt Art, which only makes sense considering this is about a 1 per case kind of card, so you have about a 1 in 12 chance of opening up a Zwart Defeat. When you do, your booster box is immediately almost paid for. I say almost because it's still a little bit lower than what the set is worth compared to some of the other secrets, but I digress, and this is still just the big chase and money card of the set. Now, just because it is the big chase and money card of the set doesn't mean you're always going to be pulling it. As I stated before, it's about a 1 in 12 chance, and you do have to look at a little bit more of what you're actually going to be looking at in your average booster box when calculating box EVs. So we know that you are going to be getting about 7 super rares in any given booster box. So that's usually the best place to start with. And we could see that the most expensive super rares is going to be Omnimon Zwart and Omnimon. So these are the two cards that you have to see in order to start thinking about your box being worth any value, just because they are the highest two, and even then, they're still not that high. So even if you do see both of these Omnimons, that's only about $20 in terms of your overall box EV, and as we could see, the rest of the super rares aren't really doing that much. So at best case scenario, if you see all of the good SRs, you're only looking at about $34 in value, and that's just the best case scenario out of your SRs. So if you're already looking at about half of what you're getting in terms of value out of just this slot alone, then we just add that on top of what you're going to be expected to get out of your secrets and alt arts. So with Omnimon Zwart defeat being the only real outlier, we could see that the majority of the SRs is going to be like an average of 15. So if we do 15 times 2, then you're looking at about another 30. So there's that $65 in terms of your overall box EV on the average basis. So if you're expected to open up a booster box of Battle of Omni and only see about $65 in terms of like your overall value, and you paid $75 for the box, then it kind of starts developing this feels bad feeling, knowing that it's going to be very hard for you to get any value out of the set. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to get any value of the set, it's just you're not likely to get remotely the value out of the set for what you paid for it. And this is only exacerbated with higher prices. So if you paid $95 for this type of a booster box, knowing you're only going to get an average of $65 out of it, then it creates this even worse feeling, and the feeling only gets worse at the higher the price that you paid for it. And then this same type of sentiment follows throughout each of the other sets. So we could see that BT04 Great Legend is even hitting under that $70 mark, or just around that $70 mark, just because the box EV is so low that no one really wants to buy it at a high price. So taking a look at BT04's singles, we could see that the high end is a little bit on the higher side, but it does have the caveat that the high end cards are a little bit harder to pull. So even though Lucimon Secret Rare's alt art is $80, it is slightly harder to pull than Omnimon Zwart Defeat's alt art. So as a result, it does hold a slightly higher price tag. Same thing with all of the secret rares. They are just still a little bit harder to pull than your average secret rare in terms of comparing it to BT05. So they're holding relatively well, same with all of their alt arts, and for the most part, the alt arts are kind of just performing the same as BT05s, with also a very similar pattern where the SRs, for the most part, are hitting that high end of $10, and then everything else is just below $10. So you could see that very same pattern here. It's just BT04, for whatever reason, a lot of the SRs are performing just a smidgen better than BT05, but regardless, it's the fact that they are doing something relatively similar, even though the box does have its minor differences, is what is very telling about the overall estimated value of what we could expect from Digimon booster boxes. Special Booster 1.5 and Special Booster 1.0 are not necessarily the exceptions to the rule, just because they are, well, a special set and they are acting and performing slightly different. The market is still reacting the same to those cards as any other cards. It's just what is in the boosters is also a huge factor, because you do get a little bit more value in your mid to low range with 1.5 and 1.0 versus what we currently have with BT04 and BT05. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should still be paying this type of a price, just because, again, the box EV is still a little bit on the lower side, and that low box EV does contribute to how you feel about paying for the booster box at particular price levels. The only unfortunate thing is that this price is kind of going to be a set default for a lot of the booster boxes because the community as a whole collectively said we are okay with this fake perception of MSRP that I kind of explained out earlier, where the MSRP of a booster box is not the price of a pack times the packs per box. And everyone was saying we're okay with that being the price because that price was just better than what we were paying for before when the items were more scarce. So that just seems to be the default price that a lot of stores are going with, and that's still just not necessarily a very correct thing to do, considering, like I keep saying, the box EV isn't necessarily worth it when you're not even going to be opening $100 worth of cards out of this booster box more often than not. On top of the fact that we know stores are buying these booster boxes for about $55 to $65. So taking a look at 1.5's singles, we could see that the most expensive card in the set is going to be Omnimon Alter S. The alternate art version is sitting at around $50, and we have the base art version sitting at about $42. So that's kind of a really interesting position to put the booster box in because the most expensive card is only $50, means that pulling this doesn't necessarily mean at $100 you're going to be even getting your value out of the set, just because the other super rares and other cards might not help equate to that. Granted, like I said, 1.5 does have a little bit of a leg up where it actually does have rares that are worth something, and it does have some uncommons that are also worth something. So it does have a bit of a range in terms of the varied prices, so that does help the set overall, because if you do get more expensive cards on the lower end, then that does help with the booster box EV, and it is more enticing to buy into that because then you're almost guaranteed to see these types of cards because they are the low end cards. So we could see that the secret rares and alternate arts are doing a little bit worse, if not the same as everything else that we have been seeing. It's just, like I said, it actually does have a range in its other rarities that are helping the overall value of the set, but I still don't think even at $100 this set is worthwhile because you have to have the stars align in order for you to get the value out of that box, and you're not going to get that most of the time. And then, like I said, Special Booster 1.0 is probably the biggest exception out of all of them, just because this booster box is treated relatively different than most of the others. Yes, you're still going to get a total of 9 hits in a box. 2 of them are going to be secret rares or alt arts, and then you are going to still get 7 SRs, but the fact that the SR pool is a lot larger and it is just harder to see specific cards, that does make Special Booster 1.0 more worthwhile, on top of it having a range of varied cards that have good value on its different rarities, on top of the box topper also having some of the more valuable box toppers that we've ever had in a very long time. So all of those contributing factors, it does add up for it to be worth more of an expensive booster box. So even taking a quick look at the Special Booster 1.0 singles, we could see that even their high end is doing a lot better than almost any of the other boosters that we've looked at before. Again, part of it is just because it is harder to pull any given card that you're looking for in the set, just because it is a very large set, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means it's helping keeping the value of the cards relatively high, and some of these cards still are played even in today's formats. And even in future formats, some of these cards still could see some relatively decent play, just because of how the Digimon card game is designed as a whole, which is a good thing because you want value out of the cards, but the value of the cards comes from various other factors, and unfortunately one of the big factors what contributes in terms of when a single is listed way lower than it should be is just how TCG Player is ran as a whole. So I'm not saying the low EVs is entirely the fault of the pull rates. I'm saying part of it is also various other sellers, because if everyone is trying to undercut each other and race to the bottom, then the cards are going to be worthless and are going to have a hard time bouncing back than if they had some value and they start decreasing in value gradually over time. So that's what's making Special Booster 1.0 a little bit more better of a overall purchase in terms of value from a single set, just because the set did gradually decrease its value rather than start from 0 and try to work its way up. So if we take a look at the future set, we could kind of estimate and guess how it's going to be performing. So with Double Diamond being the next set, we could see that it has 113 cards, which is one card larger than BT05, but the fact that BT06 is going to be coming with a lot of extra goodies only is going to help the set perform that much better. So we could see that there's 11 super rares instead of 10, so it's going to be a little bit harder to pull any given super rare, not by much, but still a little bit harder. It means that it's going to at least retain some more value versus what we currently have. We're going to be getting the same number of secret rares, which is at 2, so that means in a case setting, you're going to be seeing a full playset of each of them, and then one of each alt art. We're also going to be getting an anniversary box topper on top of our normal box topper. So there's just more value and more stuff being packed into this than some of the other sets we had before. So I do think 95 is still a little bit too much for the set, but I think something about 80, 85 is a little bit more reasonable considering all of the extra goodies that you're going to be coming with it, especially since it's also supposed to come with more dash packs as well. So I do think that even though the singles are probably going to perform very similar to BT05, where you're probably going to have the highest value SR ending up at around that $10 mark. It'll be lucky if it hits the $15 mark, and these secret rares are going to perform relatively decently well, just because both of them are very played and very popular cards. So I think BT06 is going to be a relatively decent set to get overall. I just don't think it's going to be worth that $100 of value. And just as a quick little aside, I am on GTS's website, and you could see that stores did have to place their order in for BT06 at the beginning of May, when the set is going to be released in October. So the reason why they do this is because the way Japanese card games generally are printed is not like how Wizards of the Coast prints Magic the Gathering. It's not a print-to-demand type of print run. It's literally, hey, our print run is solely based off of pre-orders with some extra buffer percentages, and then that's kind of it. So they use this pre-order data to guesstimate how much of the set that they should be printing. Like, I'm not trying to pin all of the blame on the stores for trying to make money. It's just that they need to be a little bit more realistic in their expectations as far as how well this type of a product is going to do based on what the secondary market is currently doing. So you shouldn't just snap buy boxes at $95. Stores shouldn't just snap sell boxes for $95 just because the boxes are no longer worth that amount. The best way for a store to make money is through customer retention and through active play. So if a customer is going to be coming back every single set to buy a booster box, that's how they're going to end up guaranteeing their sales and making money that way. Even though it might not be as much money as they might anticipate or want, it's still money nonetheless, on top of which you're making that customer happy, meaning that they'll come back, and hopefully they'll even come back to participate in events, and then they'll make money off of extra sales from their supplies and various other goods on top of the money that they're making from the event itself, from the players' participation. So that's what a store really should be focusing on trying to do, is grow its player base and try to make active customers and get good customer retention, rather than trying to scalp booster box prices for something higher than they normally should be. But again, not all of the blame is to put on the stores trying to sell the booster boxes, because the community as a whole kind of did just shoot themselves in the foot a little bit by stating that they are okay with always spending $95 just because during the time of the pandemic, $95 was just better than most of the other prices. But again, I stated before all the way back then that $95 is still too high of a price to be paying for this type of a product, and the market kind of agrees with me. But with the way booster boxes have been performing and the fact that there's almost no value in the booster boxes as a whole, where is all that value going? Well, it's going into promos. So anything that's basically not inside of a booster box is going to actually retain some relatively decent value, just because these are going to be harder to get cards, and these cards, even though a lot of them are just reprints, still are performing better than the majority of anything that's going to be inside of the set, sheerly just because of that rarity. Granted, not all promos are going to be super highly valuable, but the fact that a lot of the promos, for the most part, are doing better than the majority of the highly played SRs in a lot of the booster sets is a very telling sign that even though a promo might be bad, it still could see some play and it could still be worth something. But I would take everything I said today with a ginormous grain of salt, as I am not a financial expert. I am just a very active participant in the secondary market. I'm only making this type of video because I do care about the state of the card game, both from a consumer standpoint and a seller standpoint, because if the seller is not happy, then they're going to stop buying the product, and that means the customer can't buy the product because the seller stopped selling it because it's not worth them selling it because the value is not there. So we all have to do our part to try to make the game as healthy as we possibly can on both sides of the spectrum. So thank you everyone for listening to my ramblings. I know it was quite a lot, and I know none of this probably matters to anyone. But I felt like I just really needed to get it off my chest, just because it was something I really felt like I needed to say and get off my mind. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.